Spanning the past several years, Resident Evil 9 has had an insane number of leaks and rumors. From its origins years ago as the working title of Resident Evil Apocalypse, outlining its enemies, setting, characters, and more, to the more recent leaks suggesting open-world elements, to the most contemporary leaks going over tons of playtester information, discussing some key elements of the game's content, we're about to embark on an epic journey going over a definitive collection of leaks spanning the next mainline Resident Evil title. So hold your beer, smash that like button, and get comfortable, as we're about to start from the very beginning. You'll see a lot of similarities between these leaks, as some of the newer leaks very much reflect some of the preliminary leaks for Resident Evil 9, but just remember, these are all leaks and rumors and should be treated as such. Take all this with grains of salt, as nothing has been confirmed by Capcom regarding the validity of the information we're about to go over. Alright, Resident Evil 9 and what we know of it so far. Again, none of this information has been confirmed by Capcom, and some of what we are about to get into has been pretty well-known information since the leaks started surfacing all the way back in August 2022. So if you'd like to learn more about potential aspects or just some unproven leaks for the game, you are in the right place. Let's first take a look back in August 2022, where the first leak surfaced over on 4chan, claiming that the working title for the game was Resident Evil Apocalypse. While I don't have the 4chan leak in front of me because I can't freaking find the original post, other content creators and Resident Evil fans have stated that Apocalypse would more or less reflect the following. The game would take place somewhere in the western regions of North America, where players would be able to explore caves, forests, rivers, and their natural surroundings, implying that the game would be on a scale much larger than the typical, more confined settings of Resident Evil. Apocalypse would revolve around the 9th moon cycle, where creatures like goatmen and wendigos would be the common enemies. These creatures were said to be able to transform and fool players into thinking they were friendly NPCs before attacking, which would admittedly create an interesting dynamic. Another enemy, called a Barghest, resembles a quote giant black dog with a twist, with the main antagonist being a woman called Glaistig, adorned in green and covered in gold. The player is said to be accompanied by a female bioweapon called Hunter, serving as your guide in the wilderness. The leak reportedly emphasized that there would be a greater focus on survival horror, as players could barricade themselves in houses, giving players a similar aesthetic to the village segments of RE Village. This leak also said it is very easy to get lost in the map, as Apocalypse's map is reportedly quite massive. Alright, so this leak basically serves as the basis for what much of the newer leaks have added onto, especially the most recent one. But the next leak that happened after this initial 4chan leak would come in June of 2023, where a now delisted Twitter post from user Chris Marks stated that Chris Redfield would be the main protagonist of Resident Evil 9. He further added that a slew of legacy Resident Evil characters would be accompanying Chris Redfield in this 9th mainline game, including the likes of Jill Valentine, Claire Redfield, and Leon S. Kennedy, which, if true, would be so freaking awesome. Definitely hope we get to see more of these legacy RE protagonists back in the series, but let's get back on track here. Fast forward to October of 2023, and Dusk Golem states two new tidbits of info. That Resident Evil 9 is the biggest budget Resident Evil game with the longest development time for any Resident Evil game to date, stating that it started development back in 2018 and that the game wouldn't release until 2025 at the absolute earliest. Secondly, Dusk adds that Capcom sees Resident Evil 9 as a closing act for some things, perhaps the Winter Saga, to make way for new story arcs to take the series in new directions. Sounds about right to me. Alright. We're getting closer to the most recent leak, but we're not quite there yet, because a few months ago in February 2024, Dusk Golem stated that 5 Resident Evil games were in development at Capcom, with one of them being Resident Evil 9. In late March, Dusk explains that Resident Evil 9 and the upcoming Monster Hunter Wilds are building on Dragon's Dogma 2's updated RE engine, which further expanded the capabilities for open-world gameplay. He later posted that just as Dragon's Dogma 2 is like Dragon's Dogma 1 and Monster Hunter Wilds is like Monster Hunter, that RE9 will very much be Resident Evil, implying that the core DNA of Resident Evil will remain intact. Open world gameplay and RE is definitely new territory for the franchise, but considering the ambitious nature of this title, I'm hopeful that Capcom can pull this one off. In April 2024, Dusk would later state that he believed that Resident Evil 9, while intended to be revealed this summer for a release in 2025, would ultimately be pushed back to release later, and that another Resident Evil game would release in 2025 to replace what would have been Resident Evil 9's release. On May 3rd, Dusk went on to say that we should cast aside the recent statements regarding Resident Evil 9's delay, remarking that the game should be officially revealed soon and released in 2025. But later that month, on May 27th, flip-flopped yet again by stating that Resident Evil 9 had been pushed back to launch in late 2025 or early 2026. This was also the post where he announced that Capcom was working on 2 Resident Evil remakes, one being an RE0 remake and the other being an RE Code Veronica remake. In early June 2024, fans spotted Resident Evil 9 listed on PlayAsia, with the title's description revealing that the game would be called Resident Evil 9 Revenant Shadows, showcasing both Leon S. Kennedy and Jill Valentine in the title's cover art. Jumping to July 1st, during Capcom's Capcom Next stream, it was announced that the game director for Resident Evil 9 would be none other than Koshi Nakanishi, who had previously directed Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Shooting forward to September 2024, we had insider Ignis on his Discord report that RE9 should be officially revealed in a teaser in the coming weeks and months, with an expected release in the second half of 2025. Right around that time, we had a poster in Brazil make waves on Threads when the poster stated that RE9 would make an appearance at Sony's State of Play, which ended up not happening. In October 2024, a dedicated page for Resident Evil 9 went live on review aggregator website Metacritic, drawing up anticipation for a potential reveal in the coming months. With Metacritic having previously published pages for unannounced games months prior to their official reveal, like as what happened with Resident Evil 4 Gold Edition, for example, fans are expecting an official Resident Evil 9 reveal in the coming months, likely at or around the Game Awards, one of the largest industry events of the year. This brings us to the most recent leaks in November 2024, where 2 playtest sessions were revealed by Declassified on X. These play sessions were conducted in April and September this year, outlining a number of aspects of the game, including the game's setting, characters, supporting cast, story details, and more. To start, let's first talk about the game's characters. Both Jill Valentine and Leon S. Kennedy are said to be the main characters in Resident Evil 9, interestingly corroborating what we saw in the placeholder art for PlayAsia's listing of the game that went up in early June. While Jill and Leon are said to be the main playable characters in Resident Evil 9, apparently Chris Redfield and Barry Burton serve as supporting characters here. Chris Redfield has been present throughout the last several mainline Resident Evil games, but Barry Burton? Man, I'd be more than happy to see him here in Resident Evil 9 after all this time, but let's get back on track. Jill Valentine is said to be dressed more tactically in this game, reflecting an appearance similar to that of her look in the Resident Evil 5 Lost in Nightmares DLC, while Leon's look reflects something closer to his appearance in Resident Evil Damnation. While Jill will be looking decidedly younger like her appearance in Resident Evil Death Island, Leon is said to be looking much older. Alright, so we've got both Jill and Leon as main playable characters here. Plus, we have Chris Redfield and Barry Burton as supporting characters so far. But as for the setting, well, Resident Evil 9 is said to be taking place 4 years after the events of Resident Evil Village, and we are talking about the core campaign of RE Village covering Ethan Winters' saga, and not the one that takes place a number of years in the future with the Shadow of Rose DLC. According to the playtester, Resident Evil 9 will represent the closing act of the Resident Evil 7 Biohazard and Resident Evil Village story with the Megamycete, so while the Winters saga seems to have come to a close in the last 2 games, Resident Evil 9 will serve as the last entry in this trifecta of Megamycete-centric entries, punctuating the finale of this arc. With Jill Valentine of the BSAA, the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, and Leon S. Kennedy of the DSO, the Division of Security Operations under the jurisdiction of the United States federal government, the pair link up to investigate an island where the organization who created Evelyn resides. While not listed in this leak, this organization is likely referring to the Connections, who developed the first E-type bioweapon, E-001, known as Evelyn, by using a sample of the mold supplied by Miranda, along with a sample of DNA from Miranda's daughter Eva. This bit likely intrinsically ties much of Resident Evil 7 and 8 to the plot here in Resident Evil 9. Getting back to the plot of RE9, this company on the island is said to be creating mass clones of Evelyn with the Megamycete, and it's our job as Jill and Leon to bring this whole operation down. Both Chris Redfield and Barry Burton's support is said to come in the form of radio calls, with one of these calls mentioning Rosemary Winters, Ethan Winters' daughter. While we don't know the population nor the location of the island the game is said to be taking place, this all-star cast of RE protagonists is said to use Rose's blood to serve as a vaccine to rid the Megamycete infection. And speaking of, Jill and Leon are both said to eventually become infected with the Megamycete. Blue Umbrella is also mentioned to be making a return here in Resident Evil 9. As for what the island has in store for us insofar as locations, an abandoned hospital, caves, abandoned houses, a dark forest, an abandoned factory, a laboratory, and a temple were mentioned as being locations from the playtest. More specifically, Jill Valentine's section was said to have taken place in an abandoned hospital during the April playtest, whereas Leon's September playtest took place in the dark forest area. Let's now talk about the kinds of threats that were said to have been encountered by the playtester. Similar to the Ganados in Resident Evil 4, the main enemies here in Resident Evil 9 were said to be evolved zombies that can use melee weapons. They worship the moon and have moon tattoos on their arms, which reflects some of the earlier leaks about the title, preliminarily referred to as Resident Evil Apocalypse, placing great importance on the moon cycles, and most importantly, the 9th moon cycle. These enemies are said to be heard singing to the moon while looking out at sea, further corroborating the game's potential importance of the moon in Resident Evil 9. The antagonist is said to be a man called Mr. Simon, and while his motivations and persona weren't fleshed out from this playtester, other big threats are said to be in the game as well, including the final thing mentioned from this playtester being a persistent enemy that will be stalking Leon, while another enemy, the Goat Man, is said to be after Jill. With the overview of the leaks now fresh in your mind, let's dive deeper into both of these playtest sessions, starting with the one that took place in April featuring Jill Valentine exploring an abandoned hospital on the island. The playtest tasked players with locating a serum to combat the Megamycete infection affecting the residents. In the hospital, Jill encounters a number of mold-infected zombies who are armed with a number of weapons like axes, scythes, knives, and planks of wood. The playtester reported that Jill was equipped with a shotgun, a pistol, and a knife, along with crafting materials for ammunition and a variety of herbs and first aid sprays. It is in this hospital that a creature known as the Goat Man, a hulking brute with horns, a massive axe in hand, and a huge mouth on his belly, stalks Jill throughout the rooms and halls of the hospital. Just like Mr. X and Jack Baker during their respective stalking sections, for example, the Goat Man is said to not be able to be killed. Rather, it can be temporarily incapacitated. Throughout the hospital section, Jill is said to receive radio support from Chris Redfield, who provides further insight into the infection and its hallucinatory effects. The other support character, Barry Burton, also makes an appearance and advises Jill on weapon upgrades and general survival. According to the playtester, the session ends with Jill being overpowered by the Goat Man, leaving her unconscious and ultimately becomes infected. Moving on to the September playtest featuring Leon S. Kennedy, the session began on a beach under a moonlit sky. It is here where Leon observes a group of zombies that appear to be praying to the large moon near a bonfire. Moving into a dense forest setting after leaving the beach, Leon approaches Mr. Simon's laboratory, where the player was said to be tasked with tracking down Mr. Simon, as this antagonist is involved in creating cloned bioweapons of Evelyn. Leon's gear included a machine gun, a pistol, a knife, and some first aid sprays. The enemies Leon was said to encounter in the forest section include axe-wielding zombies, a witch-like woman capable of turning into flies, and hallucinated enemies that manifested as dog-like creatures. The witch is described as an eerie and seductive enemy that cannot be killed, as it taunts Leon throughout the area. Leon's playtest comes to a halt at a Blue Umbrella research base. And there you have it, a most up-to-date look at the history of Resident Evil 9 leaks, going all the way back to 2022 to the present day. Now, you tell me, my friends, which of these leaks and rumors do you find most plausible? It's awesome to see this timeline and look at how the recent leaks seem to corroborate a lot of the preliminary information we had from the 2022 leaks, and while it's highly unlikely that all this information may pan out to be true, I wouldn't be surprised to see a good amount of these rumors and leaks actually hold their weight. We're a matter of days away from the Game Awards, so hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get an official announcement for Resident Evil 9. Either way, I'll be continuing to update you all with the most pertinent Resident Evil 9 updates as we move into 2025. And as you wait, go ahead and join me here in this video as we go over the absolute scariest games the Silent Hill series has to offer. That's all I got for you in this one. I'll be seeing you real soon in the next video.